The slap echoed across the schoolyard like a gunshot. Mia Romano's head snapped to the side, her dark hair whipping across her face as the force of the blow sent her stumbling backward. Her books scattered across the concrete, pages fluttering in the autumn wind. She caught herself against the brick wall, her small hand pressed against her cheek, where the red imprint of fingers was already beginning to bloom. "That's what you get for existing," Chelsea Hartwell said, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. The other girls in her circle laughed, a chorus of cruelty that cut deeper than the physical strike. "Maybe if you wore something that didn't come from a thrift store, people might actually tolerate you. Something precious, which to her it was. These books were her escape, her window to a world beyond this daily torment." "Look at her," Chelsea continued, circling Mia like a predator. "She thinks if she ignores us, we'll just go away. But you can't ignore the truth, scholarship girl. You don't belong here. This school is for people like me, not garbage like you." The other students had formed a loose ring around them, some filming on their phones, others just watching with the passive curiosity of those grateful the target wasn't them. No one intervened, no one ever did. Mia clutched her books to her chest and tried to walk away. It was the same strategy she'd employed for the past 3 months, ever since Chelsea had decided Mia's existence was a personal affront. Keep your head down, don't react, survive until the final bell. But Chelsea wasn't finished. She grabbed Mia's backpack and yanked, hard enough to send Mia sprawling backward onto the concrete. The books scattered, again. And this time, Mia couldn't stop the small cry of pain that escaped when her elbow scraped against the rough ground. "Oops," Chelsea said with mock innocence. "My hand slipped." Mia looked up from the ground, and for just a moment, their eyes met. In Chelsea's gaze, there was something beyond teenage cruelty, something almost desperate, as if tormenting Mia was the only way she knew to feel powerful in a world where even her family's considerable wealth couldn't buy her genuine respect. But Mia couldn't afford sympathy, not when her arm was bleeding and her books were ruined and the laughter was ringing in her ears like a physical force. "What's going on here?" Mr. Peterson's voice cut through the crowd, and the students scattered like roaches when the lights turned on. Only Chelsea remained, her expression shifting seamlessly from cruel to concerned. "Thank goodness you're here, Mr. Peterson," Chelsea said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Mia fell, and I was just trying to help her up." Mia stared at her, incredulous. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. But when she looked at Mr. Peterson, she saw the familiar calculation in his eyes, the weighing of scales that never seemed to balance in her favor. "Mia, are you all right?" he asked, but his tone was perfunctory, obligatory. "She pushed me," Mia said quietly, getting to her feet. Her elbow was bleeding, a thin trickle of red running down to her wrist. "She hit me, and then she pushed me." Mr. Peterson's expression flickered with something that might have been annoyance. "That's a serious accusation. It's the truth." "I would never," Chelsea protested, placing a hand over her heart like she was taking an oath. "I saw her trip, and I was literally trying to help. You know how clumsy she can be." "I'm not clumsy," Mia said, her voice rising despite her best efforts to stay calm. "She's been bullying me for months. Every single day she—" "Enough," Mr. Peterson interrupted, holding up his hand. "Chelsea, head to class. Mia, come with me." Chelsea shot Mia a triumphant smile before walking away, her designer shoes clicking confidently on the pavement. Mia watched her go, feeling the familiar weight of injustice settling over her shoulders like a lead blanket. She followed Mr. Peterson to his classroom, leaving a small trail of blood drops on the hallway floor. Her elbow throbbed, but the pain was almost welcome. Physical pain was simpler than the emotional kind. Mr. Peterson closed the classroom door behind them and turned to face her with his arms crossed. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with thinning hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd been teaching long enough to become cynical about it. He'd been at Westbridge Academy for 15 years, had tenure, and wore both facts like armor. Sit down, Mia. She sat, placing her damaged books on the desk in front of her. The science textbook was beyond saving, the pages bloated with dirty water. This behavior needs to stop, Mr. Peterson said. Mia looked up sharply. My behavior? These constant accusations against Chelsea, the drama, the need for attention. I understand that adjusting to Westbridge has been difficult for you, coming from a different background, but you can't keep disrupting the school environment with these unfounded claims. The words hit her like physical blows. They're not unfounded. She hit me. You can see the mark on my face. Mr. Peterson barely glanced at her cheek. I see a small redness that could have come from anything. You said yourself you fell. I said she pushed me after she hit me. And Chelsea said you tripped and she tried to help. Without any other witnesses willing to corroborate your version of events, I have to consider both accounts equally. There were dozens of witnesses, Mia said, her voice cracking with frustration. The whole courtyard saw it. And I'll speak with them, Mr. Peterson said, but they both knew I wouldn't. Or if he did, those students would suddenly remember nothing, unwilling to cross Chelsea Hartwell and face the social exile that came with it. In the meantime, I need you to understand something. Chelsea comes from a very prominent family. Her father sits on the school board. Her mother is one of our most generous benefactors. These are serious people, and making allegations against their daughter without concrete proof is... So money matters more than the truth? Mr. Peterson's face hardened. Watch your tone. I'm trying to help you navigate a difficult situation. Westbridge Academy has a reputation to maintain. We can't have students making wild accusations that could damage that reputation or the reputation of other students. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mia understood perfectly. She understood that Chelsea could do whatever she wanted because her parents wrote checks with enough zeros to purchase silence. She understood that her scholarship, her perfect grades, her dreams of a better future all meant nothing when weighed against the Hartwell family's influence. She understood that Mr. Peterson wasn't interested in justice, only in maintaining the status quo that kept his job secure and the wealthy donors happy. I want to file an official complaint, Mia said quietly. Mr. Peterson sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. Mia, I strongly advise against that. It will only make things harder for you. Chelsea's parents have lawyers on retainer who handle these sorts of situations. They'll make your life very difficult, drag your family through legal proceedings you can't afford. Is that really what you want? The threat was barely veiled. Comply or suffer consequences. Mia felt tears pricking at her eyes and hated herself for it. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. May I go to the nurse? She asked instead. Yes, and Mia, I hope you'll think carefully about what we discussed. Sometimes the mature thing is to let minor conflicts go. Not everything needs to be a federal case. She left without responding, walking through the empty hallways toward the nurse's office. The lunch period was almost over, and soon these halls would flood with students who'd seen what happened and said nothing. She passed a trash can and considered throwing her ruined textbook away, but couldn't quite make herself do it. The school would charge her family to replace it, money they couldn't easily spare. The nurse cleaned her elbow with antiseptic that stung sharply, applied a bandage, and asked no questions. Mia appreciated the silence. She wasn't sure she could speak without breaking down. When the bell rang, she gathered her things and headed to her next class. Chelsea was already there, sitting in the back row, surrounded by her friends. When Mia entered, Chelsea made a small gesture of fake concern. Oh my God, Mia, is your arm okay? I felt so bad after you tripped. The other students laughed quietly. Teacher, Mrs. Chen, was still setting up her laptop and didn't notice. Mia took her seat in the front row, as far from Chelsea as possible, and opened her notebook. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes where she couldn't concentrate and hallways where she felt every eye on her. By the time the final bell rang, Mia was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with academics and everything to do with the constant vigilance required to survive. She waited 20 minutes after the final bell before leaving, hoping Chelsea and her friends would be gone. The strategy usually worked, but today Chelsea was waiting by the front gates with two of her inner circle, Madison and Brooke. "Going home to your little apartment," Chelsea called out. "Bet it's real cozy, all cramped in there with your family." Mia tried to walk past them, but Brooke stepped into her path. "Chelsea's talking to you," Brooke said. "I have nothing to say to her." "That's rude," Madison chimed in. "We're trying to be friendly." "Friendly," Mia repeated, the word tasting bitter. "Like hitting me was friendly?" Chelsea's expression hardened. "I told you that was an accident, but keep running your mouth and the next time won't be." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Chelsea said, stepping closer. She lowered her voice so only Mia could hear. "You think you're so special because you got a scholarship? You're a charity case, a pet project. And the moment you stop being interesting, they'll throw you back where you came from. So maybe learn your place before I teach it to you the hard way." Mia's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She imagined pushing back, fighting back, making Chelsea feel even a fraction of the fear and humiliation she experienced daily. But she knew how that would end. Chelsea's family had lawyers. Mia's family had nothing but each other. So she did what she always did. She walked away. Behind her, she heard their laughter, cruel and victorious. The bus ride home took 40 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that got progressively less affluent until she reached her stop in a working-class area where the houses were small but well-maintained. Her father insisted on that. No matter how little money they had, Marco Romano made sure their home looked respectable. Mia let herself in through the front door, relieved to find the house empty. Her mother worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, and her father's schedule was unpredictable. She went straight to her room, the smallest bedroom that she'd decorated with posters of galaxies and scientists she admired. Her desk was covered in textbooks and notebooks, evidence of the hours she spent studying to maintain the perfect GPA that came with her scholarship. She looked at herself in the mirror above her dresser. The mark on her face had faded to a dull pink, barely noticeable. The bandage on her elbow was small and neat. To anyone who didn't know better, she looked fine. That was the problem with this kind of cruelty. It rarely left visible scars. Mia sat at her desk and opened her math homework, trying to lose herself in the comfort of equations that always had clear answers. But she couldn't concentrate. Chelsea's words kept echoing in her head, mixing with Mr. Peterson's dismissal and the laughter of students who'd watched her humiliation. She didn't hear her father come home. Marco Romano had a way of moving quietly despite his size, a skill developed over years of work that required discretion. He appeared in her doorway without warning, still wearing the dark suit he favored for business meetings. "Mia, sweetheart, I didn't hear you come in." She quickly wiped at her eyes, hoping he wouldn't notice they were wet. "Hi, Papa, I've been home a while, just doing homework." He stepped into the room, his sharp eyes taking in everything. The discarded backpack, the ruined textbook on the floor, the careful way she was sitting that suggested she was in pain. "What happened to your elbow?" "Nothing, just a scrape." "Show me." It wasn't a request. Marco Romano didn't make requests with his family, just gentle commands that came from a place of protective concern. Mia stood and walked over to him, pulling back the sleeve of her sweater to show the bandage. His jaw tightened. "How did this happen?" "I fell at school. It's really not a big deal." He tilted her chin up gently, studying her face with the intensity of someone trained to read deception. His thumb brushed against her cheek where Chelsea had struck her, and though the mark had faded, some redness remained. You fell on your face, too? Mia pulled away, moving back to her desk. Papa, please, I'm fine. It was just a clumsy day. You're the least clumsy person I know, he said quietly. Talk to me, baby girl. What's really going on? The gentleness in his voice almost broke her. Her father could be many things, stern, imposing, even frightening to others, but with her, he was unfailingly tender. The contradiction used to confuse her when she was younger, but now she understood that people were complex, capable of being both dangerous and loving. There's a girl at school, she started, then stopped. How could she explain the daily torture without sounding like the dramatic, attention-seeking child Mr. Peterson had accused her of being? Marco sat on the edge of her bed, patient. Go on. She doesn't like me, and today we had an argument. An argument where she hit you? Mia's silence was answer enough. And the school? Marco asked, his voice carefully controlled. What did they do about this? Mr. Peterson said there wasn't enough proof, that I should let it go. Let it go, Marco repeated, and something in his tone made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. This Mr. Peterson saw you injured and told you to let it go? Her family is important, Mia explained. They donate a lot of money to the school. Her father is on the school board. Mr. Peterson said making accusations would only make things harder for me. Marco was quiet for a long moment, and Mia risked a glance at his face. His expression was calm, almost serene, which anyone who really knew him understood was when he was at his most dangerous. How long has this been going on? How long, Mia? 3 months, she admitted quietly. Since the start of the semester. 3 months. He said it like he was testing the words, seeing how they tasted. And you didn't tell me? I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could handle it. Handle being assaulted? Handle being bullied while the school protects your abuser because her family has money? He stood, and despite his control, Mia could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides. You should have told me. What would you have done? Mia asked, and there was a challenge in her voice she rarely used with her father. What can you do? They're rich and powerful, and we're... What? Marco interrupted. What are we, Mia? She fell silent, realizing she'd stepped into dangerous territory. Her father's business affairs were something they never discussed directly. She knew he worked in what he vaguely described as import/export and private security. She knew he had friends who came to the house late at night, serious men in expensive suits who called him boss. She knew her mother worried constantly, but never told him to stop because whatever he did provided them with a comfortable life. What she didn't know, because she'd never asked directly, was that Marco Romano was one of the most powerful, organized crime figures on the East Coast, heading a syndicate that controlled everything from the docks to several local unions, with connections that reached into City Hall and beyond. We're good people, Mia finished quietly, but their money talks louder than our truth. Marco walked over to her and placed both hands on her shoulders, looking directly into her eyes. Listen to me, sweetheart. No one. I don't care who their family is, how much money they have, or what position their father holds. No one hurts my daughter and walks away from it. Do you understand? Papa, please don't make a big thing out of this. It'll only make school worse for me. School is going to get much better for you starting tomorrow. I promise you that. There was something in his voice that made her believe him, but also made her nervous. She knew her father loved her unconditionally, would do anything to protect her. But she also sensed there were aspects of his protection that might be more frightening than the problem itself. I don't want anyone to get hurt, she said carefully. Neither do I. He kissed her forehead. Get back to your homework. I need to make some phone calls. He left her room and Mia tried to return to her math problems, but her mind was racing. She could hear her father's voice from his study down the hall, speaking in low tones that didn't carry specific words but conveyed unmistakable authority. An hour later, her mother came home, and Mia heard her parents talking in the kitchen. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized the cadence. Her mother's worried questioning, her father's reassuring responses. That never quite managed to fully reassure. Dinner was quiet. Marco asked about her classes, her upcoming exams, everything except the incident that afternoon. Angela Romano watched both of them with the practiced eye of someone who'd learned to read subtexts and unsaid things. She was a petite woman with dark hair, graying at the temples, and kind eyes that had seen more hardship than she'd ever wanted. "Mia, baby, your father told me what happened at school," Angela said finally, setting down her fork. "Why didn't you tell me this was going on?" "I didn't want to worry you. You work so much already. I'm your mother. Worrying about you is my job." She reached across the table and squeezed Mia's hand. "This girl who hurt you, and the teacher who ignored it, they were wrong. You know that, right?" "I know," Mia said, though part of her still felt like maybe she was making too big a deal out of it, like Mr. Peterson had suggested. That was what months of gaslighting did. Made you doubt your own reality. "Your father is going to talk to the school tomorrow," Angela continued, glancing at Marco. "Just talk, to make sure this doesn't happen again." Marco nodded, cutting into his chicken with precise movements. Just a conversation. Parent to teacher. Nothing to worry about. But Mia caught the look her parents exchanged, and she did worry. Not about what might happen to her, but about what her father might do in his attempt to protect her. That night, Mia lay in bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars she'd stuck to her ceiling years ago, back when the universe seemed magical rather than coldly indifferent. She thought about Chelsea, about Mr. Peterson, about the school that valued reputation over truth. She thought about her father making phone calls in his study with that particular tone he used when conducting business. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke to morning sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of her mother's coffee drifting up from the kitchen. For a moment, she considered pretending to be sick, but that would only delay the inevitable. Whatever was going to happen would happen whether she was there or not. She got ready for school with particular care, choosing clothes that covered the bandage on her elbow, checking her face in the mirror to ensure the mark from Chelsea's slap had fully faded. Armor, of a sort, though she knew it wouldn't protect her from much. Her father was waiting in the kitchen, dressed in one of his impeccable dark suits. He looked like he could be heading to a corporate boardroom, and in a sense, he was. "I'll drive you to school today," he said. "Papa, you don't have to." "I do. We'll stop at the hospital to see your mother first." They found Angela in the hospital cafeteria on her break, looking exhausted after a night shift, but still managing a smile when she saw them. Marco explained his plan for the school meeting, and Angela held Mia's hand while listening. "Just remember," Angela told Marco quietly, "she has to go back there. Whatever you do, she has to be able to go back." "I know," Marco assured her. "I'm just going to make sure they understand their responsibilities." They said goodbye to Angela, and Marco drove Mia to Westbridge Academy in his black Mercedes. The car was understated elegance, nothing flashy, but unmistakably expensive. Other parents dropping off their children in the circular drive cast interested glances their way. "You okay?" Marco asked as he put the car in park. "Nervous," Mia admitted. "Don't be. You've done nothing wrong. Remember that." He got out and came around to open her door, a courtesy he always extended to the women in his life. "Show me to the main office." Mia led him through the familiar hallways, hyper-aware of the students who stopped to stare at her father. Marco Romano had a presence that was hard to ignore. Not just his height and broad shoulders, but something in the way he carried himself, the calm confidence of someone who'd never had to prove himself through posturing. They reached the main office, where Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary, looked up with her usual professional smile. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with Principal Harrison," Marco said. "And Mr. Peterson. It's regarding my daughter, Mia Romano." Mrs. Patterson's smile faltered slightly as she took in Marco's expensive suit and unwavering gaze. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm sure they'll make time." Something in his tone made it less a request and more a certainty. Mrs. Patterson picked up her phone, spoke quietly to someone, then nodded. "Principal Harrison can see you in 15 minutes. Let me page Mr. Peterson." "Thank you." Marco turned to Mia. "You should get to class. I'll handle this." "I want to stay." "Mia, please. This is about me. I should be there." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but let me do the talking." They sat in the waiting area, Mia clutching her backpack and trying not to think about Chelsea arriving at school soon, about the rumors that would spread when people found out her father had come to complain. Mr. Peterson walked past the office, saw them through the window, and his expression shifted from confused to annoyed in the span of a second. Principal Harrison's door opened, and a tall woman in her 50s emerged. Margaret Harrison had been principal of Westbridge Academy for a decade, had navigated countless parent complaints and administrative challenges with diplomatic skill. She extended her hand to Marco with a professional smile. "Mr. Romano, I'm Principal Harrison. Please, come in." They entered her office, a space decorated with degrees and awards that spoke to academic achievement and educational excellence. Mr. Peterson was already there, standing near the window with his arms crossed. "Thank you for seeing us without an appointment," Marco said, gesturing for Mia to take one of the chairs across from the principal's desk. He remained standing, a subtle power move that didn't go unnoticed. "Of course. Mrs. Patterson said this concerns Mia." Principal Harrison sat behind her desk, folding her hands in front of her. "What seems to be the problem?" "The problem," Marco said quietly, "is that my daughter has been physically and emotionally assaulted at your school for 3 months, and when she reported it, she was dismissed and threatened." Mr. Peterson straightened. "That's not an accurate characterization of—" "I wasn't speaking to you yet," Marco interrupted, his tone still quiet but with an edge that made Mr. Peterson fall silent. He turned back to Principal Harrison. "Yesterday, a student named Chelsea Hartwell struck my daughter in the face and then pushed her to the ground, injuring her elbow. This happened in front of dozens of witnesses. When Mia reported it to Mr. Peterson, he told her she was being dramatic, accused her of making false allegations, and suggested that pursuing the matter would result in legal action against our family from the Hartwell's lawyers." Principal Harrison's expression remained neutral, but Mia saw her eyes flick to Mr. Peterson, then to Mia's arm where the bandage was visible beneath her sleeve. "Is this true, Mia?" the principal asked. Before Mia could respond, Mr. Peterson jumped in. "With all due respect, Principal Harrison, this is a complex situation that's being oversimplified. Chelsea Hartwell's account of events differs significantly from Mia's. I was simply trying to prevent an escalation based on unverified accusations." "Her face was marked," Marco said, his voice dropping even lower, which somehow made it more menacing. "Her elbow was bleeding. What exactly needed verification?" "Injuries don't prove their source," Mr. Peterson countered, some of his confidence returning. "Students get hurt in all sorts of ways, without corroborating. Witnesses? There were dozens of witnesses," Mia spoke up, finding her voice. "Everyone in the courtyard saw it happen. And when I checked with other students," Mr. Peterson said smoothly, "they reported seeing an accidental collision, nothing more. Teenagers have conflicts. Sometimes those conflicts are more about social adjustment than actual bullying." "Social adjustment," Marco repeated. "Is that what we're calling assault now?" Principal Harrison held up her hand. Mr. Romano, I understand you're upset, but we need to approach this calmly and objectively. Westbridge Academy has strict anti-bullying policies. If there's been a violation, we take it very seriously. Then I'm sure you'll take seriously the fact that Mr. Peterson told my daughter that the Hartwell family's position on the school board and their financial contributions made them untouchable. That pursuing the matter would only hurt Mia because the Hartwells have lawyers and we don't. The principal's expression hardened, and she turned to Mr. Peterson. Is that true? Did you say that? I was trying to be realistic about the situation, Mr. Peterson said, but he was starting to look uncomfortable. The Hartwell family has been very generous to this school. I was simply pointing out that legal battles would be stressful for everyone involved. You were protecting a bully because her parents write checks, Marco said flatly. Let's call it what it is. I was protecting the school's reputation, Mr. Peterson shot back. We can't have students making wild accusations that could damage our standing or the standing of prominent families. This is a prestigious institution. We have standards to maintain. Standards that don't include the safety of scholarship students? Marco asked. Mr. Peterson's jaw tightened. I never said that. You didn't have to. Your actions made it clear. Marco finally sat, but the movement was controlled, predatory. Let me explain something to both of you. My daughter earned her place at this school through merit. Perfect grades, perfect test scores, perfect record. She doesn't come from money, but she comes from a family that values education and hard work. That should count for something. It does, Principal Harrison assured him. Mia is an excellent student. Then why is an excellent student being assaulted while your staff looks the other way? Marco's gaze was steady on the principal. I'm a reasonable man. I understand that schools deal with complex dynamics, but I need to understand what you're going to do to fix this situation. Principal Harrison opened a file on her desk. I will personally investigate the incident, interview witnesses, review our security footage if applicable, and determine what action is appropriate. If Chelsea Hartwell did assault Mia, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Marco asked. That depends on the severity and her disciplinary history. Could range from detention to suspension to, in extreme cases, expulsion. And if your investigation is influenced by the Hartwell family's position? Marco asked. If it comes back with the same conclusion as Mr. Peterson's, that Mia is just being dramatic, that won't happen, Principal Harrison said firmly. I don't conduct biased investigations. With respect, Principal Harrison, Mr. Peterson works for you. His handling of this situation reflects on your administration. Either you have a staff member who's been accepting bribes to protect a bully, or you have an institutional culture that prioritizes wealthy donors over student safety. Either way, that's a significant problem. The word bribes hit like a bomb. Mr. Peterson went pale. That's defamation. I've never accepted any improper payments. Haven't you? Marco asked, and there was something in his tone that suggested he knew more than he was saying. We can examine your bank accounts if you'd like to verify that. Mr. Peterson looked at Principal Harrison desperately. This is outrageous. I don't have to sit here and be accused of… Actually, you do, Marco interrupted. Because I'm not finished. You see, when someone hurts my daughter, I make it my business to understand exactly who I'm dealing with. So I had some associates do a little background research. Would you like to know what they found? The room went very quiet. If you're finding this story compelling so far, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more content like this, and it's greatly appreciated. Now let's continue with what Marco discovered. 3 deposits. Marco continued, pulling a folded paper from his inside jacket pocket. $5,000 each, made to your personal account over the past 3 months. Always the week after my daughter filed a complaint about Chelsea Hartwell's behavior. Always from a shell corporation that traces back to the Hartwell family's business interests. Mr. Peterson's face had gone from pale to gray. I don't know what you think you found, but found proof that you were paid to ignore my daughter's suffering. $15,000 to look the other way while a 14-year-old girl was terrorized. Marco's voice was soft, almost gentle, which made the words hit harder. That's not a mistake or a judgment call. That's corruption. Principal Harrison stood abruptly. Mr. Peterson, is this true? The Hartwells made a donation to my classroom fund. That's not unusual. Parents donate all the time. Directly to your personal account? The principal pressed. Not through the school's foundation? It was for supplies, for educational resources. $15,000 in supplies? Marco asked. Or what were you buying? Gold-plated textbooks? This is a misunderstanding, Mr. Peterson insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. The timing is coincidental. 3 times in a row is not coincidence, Marco said. It's a pattern. It's a transaction. They paid you to protect their daughter, and you did exactly what they paid for, regardless of the harm it caused mine. Principal Harrison sat back down heavily. Mr. Peterson, I'm going to need you to provide documentation for all of these deposits, and I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately pending a full investigation. You can't do that based on unsubstantiated accusations from... Mr. Peterson caught himself before finishing the sentence, but everyone knew where it was headed. From a man like Marco Romano, with his working-class background and lack of Ivy League credentials. Based on documented financial transactions that suggest ethical violations, Principal Harrison corrected. And yes, I absolutely can. Please surrender your access badge and leave campus. This is ridiculous, Mr. Peterson sputtered. The Hartwell family will what? Marco asked. Please finish that thought. Mr. Peterson seemed to realize he was only digging his hole deeper. He pulled his badge from his pocket and slapped it on Principal Harrison's desk. You're making a mistake. The Hartwells are very influential. Then perhaps they should have used their influence to raise a daughter who doesn't assault her classmates, Marco said, instead of using it to bribe teachers and cover up abuse. Mr. Peterson left without another word, slamming the door behind him. In the silence that followed, Mia realized she'd been holding her breath. Her father had just accomplished in 15 minutes what she'd been unable to do in 3 months of trying. Principal Harrison turned to Mia with an expression that might have been sympathy. Mia, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry you weren't protected the way you should have been. That ends now. What about Chelsea? Mia asked quietly. I'll be calling her parents in for a meeting today and speaking with Chelsea herself. If the investigation confirms she's been bullying you, she'll be expelled. Her father is on the school board, Mia pointed out, echoing the argument that had been used to silence her so many times before. I don't care if her father owns the school, Principal Harrison said firmly. No student is above our code of conduct. No family's money is worth more than another student's safety. Marco stood, buttoning his suit jacket. I appreciate you saying that. Now let's see if you follow through. The principal met his gaze steadily. You have my word. Good, because if I hear about another incident, if my daughter sheds one more tear because of this place, I'll be back. And I won't be nearly as pleasant. There was no bluster in the threat, no raised voice, but something in Marco's calm delivery made it absolutely clear he meant every word. Principal Harrison nodded, the message received. Mia will be safe here. You have my personal guarantee. Marco turned to his daughter. You okay, sweetheart? Mia nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. Her father had walked in and dismantled the entire power structure that had protected Chelsea. He'd exposed Mr. Peterson's corruption, forced the principal's hand, and done it all without losing his temper or making empty threats. I should get to class, Mia said. I'll walk you, Marco offered. They left Principal Harrison's office and walked through hallways that were mostly empty now that classes had started. Their footsteps echoed on the polished floors. Papa, how did you know about the money? Mia asked quietly. I told you. I had some people look into the situation. What people? Friends who are good at finding information. He stopped at the entrance to her English classroom. Mia, I need you to understand something. What I did in there, getting that information, using it as leverage, that's the world I operate in. It's not pretty and it's not always legal, but it's effective. I know you're not just an import-export, Mia said carefully. Marco looked at her for a long moment. You're 14. You shouldn't have to know about my business. I'm smart enough to put pieces together. I know you do things that Mom worries about, things that require late-night meetings and friends who call you boss. Your mother and I have always tried to keep you separate from that part of my life. I appreciate that, but I'm also grateful you used it to help me today. Does that make me a bad person? No, baby girl, it makes you human. He kissed her forehead. Get to class. If anyone gives you any trouble today, any at all, you text me immediately, okay? Okay. She watched him walk away. This man who could be terrifyingly efficient when protecting his family, but had never raised his voice to her, never shown her anything but patient love. She understood in that moment that her father existed in shades of gray, that he could be both dangerous and devoted, both feared and loving. Mia slipped into her English class late, mumbling an apology to the teacher. The other students barely glanced up, absorbed in their discussion of the Great Gatsby. She took her seat and tried to focus on the themes of wealth and corruption, finding them suddenly much more relevant than they'd been yesterday. At lunch, she sat alone as usual, but today felt different. She noticed other students glancing at her with something that might have been respect, or might have been fear. Word traveled fast at Westbridge, and someone had clearly seen her father's visit. She was halfway through her sandwich when Chelsea appeared at her table, flanked by Madison and Brooke. Mia tensed, preparing for another confrontation. You got Mr. Peterson fired, Chelsea said, her voice low and angry. I didn't get him fired. He got himself fired by taking bribes from your parents. Chelsea's perfect face twisted with something ugly. You think you're so special now? You think having your daddy come fight your battles changes anything? It changed enough that you're scared, Mia observed, and she was surprised by her own courage. Maybe some of her father's fearlessness had rubbed off on her. I'm not scared of you or your criminal father, Chelsea hissed. The words hung in the air, and Mia realized with a jolt that Chelsea knew. Somehow, the Hartwells had figured out exactly who Marco Romano was. Careful, Mia said softly. You don't want to make this worse than it already is. Worse? My parents have lawyers who will destroy your whole family. They'll dig into every shady thing your father has ever done and make sure he ends up in prison where he belongs. It was exactly the kind of threat that would have terrified Mia yesterday. But today, after watching her father calmly dismantle Mr. Peterson's defense, after seeing the fear in the principal's eyes when Marco made his quiet promises, Mia found she wasn't scared. Your parents paid a teacher to cover up your abuse of me, Mia said. Maybe focus on your own legal problems before threatening mine. Chelsea looked like she wanted to hit Mia again, actually raising her hand, but Madison grabbed her arm. Everyone's watching, Madison whispered urgently. Don't! Chelsea lowered her hand, but her eyes promised future retribution. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Principal Harrison's voice cut through the tension. She'd approached so quietly that no one had noticed. Chelsea, come with me. Your parents are here. This is such bullshit, Chelsea muttered, but she followed the principal, her friends trailing behind like confused ducklings. Mia watched them go, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and anxiety. She'd won this battle, but she knew the war might be far from over. The Hartwells were powerful people, and powerful people didn't take losses gracefully. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and curious stares. By the time the final bell rang, Mia's nerves were frayed from the constant attention. She packed her bag and headed for the exit, relieved to escape. But as she walked through the front gates, she saw a familiar black Mercedes parked across the street. Her father was leaning against it, looking at his phone. When he saw her, he smiled and waved her over. Papa, what are you doing here? Making sure you get home safely. Get in. She climbed into the passenger seat and he drove away from the school. They'd gone several blocks before Mia noticed they weren't heading toward home. Where are we going? There's someone who wants to meet you. Who? Instead of answering, Marco drove to an upscale Italian restaurant in the business district. He parked in front and led Mia inside, where a hostess greeted him by name and immediately showed them to a private room in the back. Inside, 3 men in expensive suits were seated at a large table. They stood when Marco entered, showing a deference that made clear who was in charge. The oldest of them, a silver-haired man in his 60s, extended his hand to Mia with a warm smile. You must be Mia. Your father talks about you constantly. I'm Vincent Castellano. Mia shook his hand, trying not to show her nervousness. She recognized the name from news reports about organized crime investigations, though nothing had ever been proven. Vincent Castellano was a businessman who owned restaurants and construction companies, but federal prosecutors had tried for years to connect him to various criminal enterprises. Nice to meet you, she managed. Sit, please. Vincent gestured to the table, which was already laden with plates of pasta and bread. We were just about to eat. Marco pulled out a chair for Mia, and she sat, feeling completely out of her depth. The other 2 men introduced themselves as Anthony and Carlo, both apparently associates of her father's business. Your father told us about your trouble at school, Vincent said, serving Mia a generous portion of pasta. Sounds like you handled yourself well. I didn't really handle anything. Papa did. You stood up for yourself for 3 months without telling anyone, Vincent corrected. That takes strength. Not many kids your age have that kind of backbone. I didn't have much choice. There's always a choice, Anthony chimed in. You could have quit school, could have backed down, could have let them break you. You didn't. Mia looked at her father, confused by this strange meeting. Marco gave her a reassuring nod. I wanted you to meet some of the people I work with, Marco explained. People I trust. Because I want you to understand something important. The world isn't fair, Mia. People with money and power use it to protect themselves and hurt others. What happened at your school, that's just a small example of how things really work. I'm starting to figure that out, Mia said quietly. The question is what you do with that knowledge, Vincent said. Some people get bitter and angry. Some people give up. And some people learn to operate in the world as it actually is, not as it should be. Your father operates in the real world, Carlo added. He protects his family and the people who depend on him. That's honorable work, even if society doesn't always see it that way. Mia understood what they were doing. They were introducing her to her father's real life, the one that existed behind the cover story of Import/Export. They were showing her the crew, the organization, the structure of power that Marco operated within. Why are you telling me this now? Mia asked. Because you're not a child anymore. Marco said gently. What happened at school proved that. You're old enough to see how the world really works. and I'd rather you learn from me than from harsh experience. But I'm still going to school, right? I'm not joining the family business? The men laughed and Vincent patted her hand. Of course you're going to school. Your father wants you to have every opportunity, every choice. Education is important. But it's also important to understand that education alone won't protect you from people like the Hartwells. Sometimes you need other kinds of power, like the power to investigate someone's bank accounts and expose their corruption, Mia asked. Exactly like that, Marco confirmed. I used my resources to protect you. That's what family does. They ate together, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: sports, restaurants, upcoming holidays. The men asked Mia about her favorite subjects and her college plans, treating her with respect rather than condescension. By the end of the meal, she felt strangely comfortable, like she'd been welcomed into a secret society. When they finally left the restaurant, Marco drove Mia home in comfortable silence. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Are you upset? Marco asked as they pulled into their driveway. About me showing you that part of my life? No, Mia said honestly. I'm glad I know the truth, and I'm grateful you protected me. Always, baby girl, no matter what it takes. Inside, Angela was waiting with dinner ready and questions in her eyes. Marco gave her a look that said they'd talk later, and the three of them ate together like a normal family, discussing normal things: Mia's homework, Angela's difficult patients, plans for the weekend. But everything had changed, and they all knew it. Mia had been given a glimpse behind the curtain, had seen the machinery that kept her safe and comfortable. She'd learned that her father was both more dangerous and more devoted than she'd imagined. That night, lying in bed, Mia thought about Chelsea and Mr. Peterson, about Principal Harrison's promises and the Hartwell family's threats. She thought about her father's quiet power and Vincent Castellanos' talk of real-world operations. She thought about the choice between giving up and learning to navigate darkness. And she realized she was her father's daughter in more ways than one. The next morning, Mia arrived at school to find the campus buzzing with news. Chelsea Hartwell had been expelled. Mr. Peterson had resigned. And Principal Harrison had called an emergency assembly to address bullying and the school's commitment to student safety. Mia sat in the auditorium listening to Principal Harrison talk about respect and accountability, watching students whisper and cast glances her way. She was no longer invisible, no longer the scholarship girl who could be pushed around without consequence. When the assembly ended, a few students she'd never spoken to before approached her in the hallway. Hey, I'm sorry I didn't say anything when Chelsea was messing with you, a girl from her biology class said. I was scared of becoming a target. Me too, another student admitted. But that was wrong. We should have backed you up. It's okay, Mia said, and she meant it. She understood fear, understood the calculations people made to protect themselves. It's over, now. But it wasn't quite over. 2 days later, Mia was called to Principal Harrison's office. When she arrived, she found her father already there, along with a man and woman she didn't recognize. They were both dressed expensively, the woman in a designer suit, the man in custom tailoring that probably cost more than Mia's entire wardrobe. Mia, these are Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, Principal Harrison said. Chelsea's parents. They wanted to speak with you and your father. Mia sat next to Marco, her heart pounding. The Hartwells looked like people accustomed to getting their way, but today they also looked uncomfortable, like they'd been forced into a situation they couldn't control. We wanted to apologize, Mrs. Hartwell said stiffly, for our daughter's behavior and for our part in enabling it. We had no idea Chelsea was bullying you, Mr. Hartwell added. We thought she was just having normal teenage conflicts. You thought that $15,000 in bribes to a teacher was normal conflict resolution? Marco asked quietly. Mr. Hartwell's jaw tightened. Those payments were made without my direct knowledge. An assistant handled them, and they were characterized differently. Of course, Marco said, his tone making clear he didn't believe a word. And the lawyers you had on retainer to threaten my family? Also handled by assistants. We were protecting our daughter, Mrs. Hartwell said defensively. Any parent would do the same. No, Angela said, speaking for the first time. She'd arrived without Mia noticing, still in her nurse's scrubs. Any parent would teach their child not to hurt others. You taught your daughter that money could buy her way out of consequences. Look where that got her. The Hartwells had no response to that. We're here to offer compensation, Mr. Hartwell said finally, for Mia's pain and suffering, and to assure you that there will be no legal action from our side regarding the school's decision or Mr. Peterson's departure. We don't want your money, Marco said. Everyone wants money, Mr. Hartwell countered. I'm not everyone. Marco leaned forward slightly, and the Hartwells actually leaned back, an unconscious recognition of the predator across from them. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your daughter home and get her the psychological help she clearly needs. You're going to resign from the school board so your presence doesn't influence future decisions. And you're going to make a donation to the school's scholarship fund in Mia's name. Not to buy anything, but because it's the right thing to do. And if we refuse, Mr. Hartwell asked, then I'll make sure every media outlet in the city knows about the bribes you paid to cover up your daughter's violence. I'll make sure the federal investigators who've been looking into your business dealings get some very interesting information about shell corporations and financial improprieties. I'll make sure your reputation ends up exactly where it belongs, in the gutter. The threat hung in the air, and Mia watched the Hartwells' faces go through a rapid calculation. Whatever they knew or suspected about Marco Romano, it was enough to make them believe he could deliver on his promises. Fine, Mr. Hartwell said finally. I'll resign from the board. We'll make the donation. Chelsea is already in therapy. Good. Then we're done here. Marco stood, extending his hand. I hope your daughter learns from this experience. I really do. Mr. Hartwell shook his hand, and Mia could see the relief on his face at being dismissed. The Hartwells left quickly, and Principal Harrison let out a breath she'd apparently been holding. Thank you for handling that with restraint, she said to Marco. I'm a reasonable man, Marco replied, when people are reasonable with me. Mia, I want you to know that we're implementing new anti-bullying protocols, Principal Harrison said. Anonymous reporting, systems, mandatory staff training, regular student surveys. What happened to you won't happen to another student. I appreciate that, Mia said. And if you ever feel unsafe here, you come directly to me. My door is always open. They left the school, and this time when Marco drove Mia home, Angela came with them. In the car, Mia's mother held her hand tightly. I'm proud of you, Angela said, for surviving this with your dignity intact. I had help, Mia pointed out, glancing at her father. Yes, you did, and you always will. Angela squeezed her hand. But you were the one who had to endure it day after day. That took courage. Before we continue to the conclusion, I want to ask you to do something for me. If this story has resonated with you, if you found value in seeing this kind of injustice addressed, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you or someone you know experienced bullying? How was it handled? Your stories matter, and this community is stronger when we share our experiences. And if you're enjoying the content on this channel, consider supporting us by buying a cup of coffee through the link in the description. Every contribution helps us create more stories like this one. Thank you. And now let's see how Mia's story concludes. Over the following weeks, Westbridge Academy transformed. The new anti-bullying policies weren't just paper promises, but actual enforcement. Students who'd previously gotten away with cruelty found themselves facing real consequences. The culture shifted from protecting the wealthy and powerful to protecting the vulnerable. Mia noticed the change in small ways. Students who'd never spoken to her before started saying hello in the hallways. Teachers paid more attention, asked if she needed help, treated her like she mattered. The scholarship fund established by the Hartwell donation was publicized in a school newsletter, and instead of being known as the poor scholarship girl, Mia became known as the girl who changed the school. But the biggest change was in how Mia saw herself. One afternoon, she was in the library studying when a younger student approached her hesitantly. The girl was maybe 12, a seventh grader with nervous energy and bitten fingernails. "You're Mia Romano, right?" the girl asked. "That's me." "I'm Emma. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For standing up to Chelsea. She used to bully me too before she moved on to you. I never had the courage to report it, and I felt so guilty when I heard what she was doing to you. Like I should have warned you or said something." Mia gestured for Emma to sit down. "You were scared. I understand that. I was scared too. But you did something about it. Eventually, after months of suffering." Mia closed her textbook, giving Emma her full attention. "If someone's bothering you now, you should report it. The school is actually listening now." "No one's bothering me anymore. Since Chelsea left, a lot of the meanness just kind of stopped. Like she was setting the tone, and without her, people are nicer." "Bullies often inspire imitators," Mia said. "Take away the leader, and the behavior changes." Emma nodded, then asked quietly, "Is it true your dad is in the Mafia?" Mia had been asked this question several times in the past weeks, always in whispers, always with a mixture of fear and fascination. She'd developed a standard response. "My dad works in private security and business consulting. People say all kinds of things about successful people they don't understand." It was technically true if you accepted very loose definitions of security and consulting. Emma seemed satisfied with the answer and left, thanking Mia again. But the question lingered in Mia's mind. Her father had protected her using methods and resources that existed outside the normal channels. He'd investigated bank accounts, made veiled threats, and leveraged his reputation to terrify people into compliance. None of it was what you'd call legal or traditional. Did that make it wrong? Mia thought about the alternative. She could have continued suffering in silence while the school protected Chelsea, and Mr. Peterson counted his bribe money. She could have eventually broken under the pressure, dropping out or having her grades suffer or developing anxiety that would haunt her for years. The proper channels had failed her completely. Her father had stepped outside those channels and fixed the problem in days. That evening, Mia found Marco in his study, reviewing documents that he quickly turned over when she entered. Some parts of his business were still kept separate from her, and she appreciated the boundary. "Can I ask you something?" Mia said, sitting in the leather chair across from his desk. "Always." "Do you think you did the right thing? With the school?" "I protected my daughter. That's always the right thing." "But the way you did it, investigating people, threatening them, using your connections, that's not how normal people solve problems." Marco set down his pen and gave her his full attention. "Normal people let institutions fail them and accept it as the cost of civilization. I'm not normal people." "But what if everyone operated like you? What if everyone used threats and intimidation instead of following the rules?" "The rules failed you, Mia. The people who wrote those rules, who are supposed to enforce them, they took bribes to ignore your suffering. So tell me, what value do those rules have if they only protect the powerful?" Mia didn't have a good answer to that. "Here's what I believe," Marco continued. "There's justice, and then there's law. Sometimes they align, and that's wonderful. But when they don't, when the law protects predators and punishes victims, you have to decide which matters more to you. I choose justice every time. Even if it means breaking the law, even then. Stood and came around the desk, sitting on the edge so he was closer to her eye level. Mia, you're going to go to college, probably law school if you keep your current trajectory. You're going to learn all about how the system is supposed to work, about rights and procedures and due process. That education is important. But I want you to remember what you learned here too. What did I learn? That systems are run by people, and people can be corrupted. That money and power will always try to protect themselves. And that sometimes the only way to fight power is with different power. He touched her chin gently, the same gesture he'd used when she was a little girl. You don't have to choose my path. God knows I want better for you, but I want you to know it exists, that it's an option when everything else fails. I won't forget, Mia promised, and she didn't. Mia finished her first year at Westbridge Academy with perfect grades and a newfound confidence. The scholarship fund, in her name, helped 3 other students from working-class backgrounds attend the school. And Mia made a point of checking in with them, making sure they weren't experiencing what she had. Chelsea Hartwell, she heard through the grapevine, had been sent to a boarding school in Switzerland where her parents hoped distance and discipline would reform her behavior. Mr. Peterson took a job at a public school in another state, his reputation damaged enough that private institutions wouldn't touch him. The Hartwells kept their promise about the donation and Mr. Hartwell's resignation from the board, though Mia suspected her father's ongoing surveillance had something to do with their compliance. Sometimes she'd see unfamiliar cars parked near the Hartwell residence, subtle reminders that Marco Romano didn't forget easily. Principal Harrison proved to be true to her word. The new policies weren't just window dressing, but actual change. Students felt safer reporting problems, and staff were held accountable when they failed to address them. Westbridge Academy wouldn't win awards for progressive anti-bullying practices, but it was significantly better than it had been. Mia's mother worried constantly about the attention the situation had brought to their family, but Marco assured her that everything was handled. The investigators who'd been looking into his business dealings suddenly found their funding cut. The journalists who'd started asking questions about the Romano family received visits from their editors, telling them to pursue other stories. Marco Romano might not control the entire city, but he controlled enough of it to protect his own. As summer approached, Mia sat in the garden where her father had first discovered her crying all those months ago. The roses were blooming now, filling the air with sweet fragrance. She was reading a book on constitutional law, already preparing for the future her father had encouraged her to pursue. Marco found her, there, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade her mother had made. He handed her one and sat on the bench beside her. "Heavy reading for summer break," he observed. "I'm interested in how the legal system is supposed to work versus how it actually works. Finding any answers?" "Mostly more questions." She set the book aside. "Papa, can I ask you something I've been wondering about?" "Of course." That day, in Principal Harrison's office, when you showed Mr. Peterson the evidence of his bribes, how did you get that information so quickly? It was less than 24 hours between when I told you what happened and when you confronted him. Marco smiled. "I have people who are very good at finding information. When I told them my daughter was in danger and I needed answers fast, they made it a priority. But bank records are supposed to be private. They are, unless you know the right people to ask. So you broke the law to expose someone else breaking the law. I did what was necessary to protect you. Would you rather I hadn't?" Mia thought about it honestly. "No, I'm glad you did. I just wonder sometimes where the line is, you know? Between justified action and becoming the kind of person who abuses power for their own benefit." "The line?" Marco said thoughtfully, is intention and consequence. Mr. Peterson used his power to protect a bully and enrich himself. I used my power to protect my daughter and stop abuse. The methods might look similar from outside, but the motivation and result are completely different. But who decides which motivations are justified? Exactly the question you should be asking. He put his arm around her shoulders. That's why you need to study law and philosophy and ethics, not to find easy answers because there aren't any, but to develop your own moral compass that's more sophisticated than simple rules. Did you develop your moral compass that way? Marco laughed. I developed mine through hard experience and making more mistakes than I like to remember. You're smarter than I was. You'll do better. They sat together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, both aware that their relationship had changed fundamentally over the past months. Mia had been given access to knowledge she couldn't unknow, had seen her father exercise power in ways that were both protective and frightening. But she'd also learned that the world was more complicated than she'd been taught, that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules, and that family loyalty ran deeper than legal boundaries. I love you, Papa, she said quietly. I love you too, baby girl. Always. Angela called them in for dinner, and they went inside to the warm kitchen where the table was already set. As they ate together, talking and laughing about ordinary things, Mia felt a deep sense of gratitude. She'd survived something that could have broken her, had emerged stronger and wiser, protected by a father who loved her, enough to challenge an entire system. Years later, Mia Romano would graduate from Westbridge Academy as valedictorian, give a speech about standing up to injustice that made several administrators uncomfortable, and head to college on a full scholarship. She'd study law as her father had predicted, but she'd also study criminology and ethics, trying to understand the complex relationship between justice and power. She'd stay close to her family, even as she built her own life and career. She'd use the lessons she learned, both the official ones from her expensive education and the unofficial ones from her father's world, to navigate challenges with a sophisticated understanding of how power really worked. And she'd never forget the day her father walked into that school and showed her that sometimes love means being willing to step outside the boundaries of what's comfortable or conventional to protect the people who matter most. But that's all far in the future. For now, she's 14 years old, eating dinner with her parents, feeling safe and valued and loved. The trauma of Chelsea's bullying is fading, being replaced by confidence and purpose. She knows who she is, where she comes from, and what her father did to protect her. Most importantly, she knows that she's not helpless, that when institutions fail and powerful people abuse their position, there are other forms of power that can restore balance. It's not a lesson they teach in school, but it might be the most valuable education she'll ever receive. The story of Mia Romano and her father's intervention spread beyond Westbridge Academy, becoming something of an urban legend in certain circles. Parents who'd felt powerless against systemic bullying and institutional indifference took heart from it. Schools reconsidered their policies, afraid of becoming the next Westbridge, afraid of having their own Mr. Petersons exposed. Chelsea Hartwell's story circulated too, as a cautionary tale about entitlement and the consequences of believing money could buy you immunity from accountability. Some people sympathized with her, seeing her as a troubled teenager failed by her parents. Others saw her as an example of how privilege breeds cruelty. Mr. Peterson never taught again after his contract at the public school wasn't renewed. The details of why he'd left Westbridge eventually came out through the teacher gossip network, and his reputation was permanently damaged. He'd traded $15,000 for his entire career, proof that corruption rarely pays in the long run. The Hartwell family's reputation took a hit as well. Mr. Hartwell's business deals became harder to close when potential partners heard about the scandal. Mrs. Hartwell found herself quietly excluded from the social circles she'd once commanded. They moved to another state within 2 years, trying to escape the shadow of their daughter's behavior and their own complicity in enabling it. Principal Harrison became something of a reformer, speaking at education conferences about the importance of protecting all students equally regardless of their family's financial status. She credited the Romano situation with opening her eyes to systemic problems she'd been too comfortable ignoring. As for Marco Romano, he continued operating in the shadows, running his business empire with the same efficiency and ruthlessness he'd demonstrated at Westbridge. But those who knew him well noted a subtle change. He became more involved in community organizations, more willing to use his influence to help families who were being failed by institutions. Some called it a conscience awakening. Others said it was strategic PR. Marco didn't care what they called it. He'd seen what happened when good people had no recourse against corruption and power, and he'd decided to be a different kind of recourse. One evening, about 6 months after the confrontation at Westbridge, Mia came home to find her father in the kitchen cooking dinner, which was unusual enough to merit investigation. "Where's Mom?" "Working late. I thought I'd make her favorite." He was preparing the components for pasta carbonara, moving with surprising grace for such a large man. "How was school?" "Good. I got my calculus test back. Perfect score." "Of course you did." He smiled at her. I never doubted it. "Set the table?" She got plates and silverware, falling into the familiar rhythm of domestic routine. As she worked, she noticed a newspaper on the counter, folded to an article about education reform and the growing awareness of how wealth inequality affected student safety. "Did you read this?" she asked, gesturing to the article. Things are changing. Slowly, but they're changing. Because of what happened with me. Partly. Your situation got attention because it had drama, the expelled bully, the corrupt teacher, the mysterious father who exposed it all. But the underlying issues were always there. Sometimes it just takes one case to make people pay attention. Mia sat at the kitchen table, watching her father cook. "Do you think Chelsea's doing okay? I know she was horrible to me, but sometimes I wonder if she ever got the help she needed." Marco paused in his cooking, considering the question. "That's a good question. It shows you have a kind heart despite what she put you through." "I don't think she was evil, just broken and mean because she could be." Hurt people," Marco agreed. "And people raised to believe they're above consequences tend to act like it. I hope she's getting help. I really do. But that's not your responsibility to worry about." "I know. I just think about her sometimes." "That's because you're a better person than she deserves you to be." He came over and kissed the top of her head. "Don't lose that empathy, Mia. The world will try to harden you, especially if you go into law like you're planning. Don't let it." "Did the world harden you?" "In some ways, but your mother and you kept the important parts soft." He returned to his cooking. "Speaking of which, I have something to tell you." "What?" "Your mother and I have been talking. With the settlement money from the Hartwells. I thought you said we didn't want their money." "I said we didn't want compensation. But they insisted on making a payment to your college fund, separate from the scholarship fund. We thought about refusing, but your mother pointed out that you earned that money through your suffering. It's yours." Mia didn't know how to feel about that. Money from the family that had enabled her tormentor felt tainted somehow. "How much?" "Enough to pay for 4 years at any college you want, plus graduate school if you need it. You won't have to worry about student loans or work-study programs. You can focus entirely on your education." That's a lot of money. They could afford it, and more importantly, you deserve it. Chelsea. Hartwell stole months of peace and happiness from you. Her parents tried to buy their way out of responsibility. This is them finally being held accountable in at least one small way. When Angela came home from her shift, she found dinner ready and her family waiting. The three of them ate together, and Mia watched her parents interact with the easy affection of people who'd weathered storms together. Her mother knew what her father was, what he did in the darker hours, and loved him anyway. Her father knew the cost his choices imposed on his wife and tried to minimize it however he could. It was complicated and imperfect and real. After dinner, Mia retreated to her room to work on an essay about justice in literature. She was writing about To Kill a Mockingbird, exploring the theme of how the legal system often failed to deliver actual justice. As she wrote, she found herself thinking about Atticus Finch and her own father. Atticus worked within the system, believing in its potential despite its flaws. He lost his case but maintained his integrity. Marco operated outside the system, believing it was too corrupted to rely on. He won his case but compromised his legal standing in doing so. Which approach was right? Maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe the right question was which approach was effective in any given situation, and whether you could live with the consequences of your choices. Mia was still pondering these questions when her phone buzzed with a text from a blocked number. "I hope you're happy with what you did to my life." She stared at the message, her heart rate increasing. Chelsea. It had to be. Before she could decide whether to respond, another message came through. "You ruined everything. My parents hate me. I have no friends. My school here is terrible. All because you couldn't handle a little teasing." Mia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of her wanted to engage, to defend herself, to point out that Chelsea had brought this on herself. But she remembered her father's words about not letting the world harden her. Instead, she texted back, "I hope you're getting help. I hope you learn from this. I hope you become a better person." Then she blocked the number and told her father about the texts. Marco's expression darkened. "I thought the Hartwells agreed to keep Chelsea from contacting you." "She probably used a friend's phone or something. It's okay. I blocked her." "It's not okay. They violated our agreement." He pulled out his own phone. "Papa, please, don't make it into a big thing. She sent 2 texts. She's probably just hurting and lashing out." I responded with kindness and blocked her. "It's done." Marco looked at his daughter for a long moment, and she saw him warring with his protective instincts. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, but if she contacts you again, I'll tell you immediately." "Good." The text didn't come again. Whatever outlet Chelsea had been seeking, Mia's. Paul's response apparently didn't provide it. Mia hoped that meant Chelsea was moving on, healing, becoming someone who didn't need to hurt others to feel powerful. As the school year drew to a close, Westbridge Academy held its annual awards ceremony. Mia received recognition for academic excellence, perfect attendance, and, in a new category, the Courage in Adversity Award. Principal Harrison presented it personally, speaking about students who faced challenges with grace and whose bravery improved the school for everyone. Mia accepted the award, a crystal plaque that caught the light beautifully, and gave a brief speech thanking her teachers and her family. When she mentioned her father, she saw him in the audience next to her mother, his eyes suspiciously shiny. After the ceremony, parents and students mingled in the lobby with punch and cookies. Several families approached Mia to congratulate her, including the parents of the students who'd received scholarships from the fund, bearing her name. "You changed our daughter's life," one mother said, gripping Mia's hand tightly. "She loves this school, and it's only possible because of what you went through." "I'm glad something good came from it," Mia said honestly. As the crowd thinned out, Principal Harrison approached the Romano family. "Mr. Romano, Mrs. Romano, could I speak with you for a moment?" They stepped aside from the crowd, and the principal's expression was serious. "I wanted you to know that the school board has implemented new oversight procedures for board members with children enrolled here. No board member can be involved in disciplinary decisions affecting their own children. It's a conflict of interest policy we should have had all along. That's good, Marco said. It's because of what happened with your family. I want you to know that we've taken real lessons from this situation. Westbridge Academy is better now because Mia had the courage to keep standing up for herself and because you had the courage to hold us accountable. Just make sure it lasts, Marco said. Make sure the next scholarship student from a working class family gets the same protection as the richest kid here. I will. You have my word. They left the ceremony as the sun was setting, painting the school's old brick buildings in warm gold light. Mia looked back at Westbridge Academy, this place that had been the site of so much pain and ultimately so much growth. Ready for summer? Marco asked, unlocking the car. So ready, Mia said. Good. Your mother and I were thinking we'd take a trip, maybe Italy. Show you where the Romano family came from. Really? Really, we've earned a vacation. The summer trip to Italy was everything Mia had hoped for, and more. They explored ancient ruins and Renaissance art, ate incredible food, and met distant relatives who welcomed them with overwhelming hospitality. Marco showed her the village where his grandfather had been born, a tiny place in the mountains where life moved at a pace completely foreign to their American existence. This is what he left, Marco explained, standing in the village square. He came to America with nothing, built a life through hard work and harder choices. Everything we have came from his courage to leave everything he knew. Do you think he'd be proud of you? Mia asked. I hope so. He understood that sometimes you do whatever it takes to protect your family. That's universal, not Italian or American, just human. They spent 2 weeks abroad, and Mia felt the tension of the past year finally release from her shoulders. She laughed more than she had in months, tried new things, spoke broken Italian that made the locals smile, and felt young in a way she hadn't since Chelsea first targeted her. When they returned home, tanned and relaxed, Mia had 1 more year of middle school before high school. She decided to stay at Westbridge for high school, despite her parents offering to send her anywhere she wanted. The school had changed for the better, and she wanted to be part of continuing that change. As 9th grade began, Mia noticed she was treated differently. Teachers respected her. Students either admired her or left her alone. The scholarship students looked to her as a mentor. She'd become, without trying, a symbol of resistance to the old hierarchies. It was strange and sometimes uncomfortable, but she tried to use the position well. When she saw bullying, she reported it, and unlike before, adults listened. When new students seemed lost or targeted, she befriended them. When teachers fell back into old patterns of favoritism, she called it out respectfully, but firmly. Westbridge Academy would never be perfect. No institution run by humans ever is. But it was better than it had been, and Mia was proud to be part of that improvement. One day in late October, Mia was studying in the library when she overheard 2 younger students talking. My sister went to school with Chelsea Hartwell, one was saying. She said Chelsea's totally different now, like, actually nice. No way, people don't change that much. I guess boarding school and therapy really helped. She apparently volunteers at an animal shelter and everything. Mia didn't join the conversation, but she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe Chelsea really had learned from what happened. Maybe being held accountable had forced her to examine herself and grow. Maybe the story had a redemptive ending after all. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe Chelsea was just better at hiding her cruelty. Mia would probably never know for sure. What she did know was that she'd survived, had grown stronger, and had learned lessons that would serve her for the rest of her life. She'd learned that standing up for yourself was worth the cost. She'd learned that institutions often failed the people they were supposed to protect. She'd learned that power came in many forms, and sometimes the Unconventional forms were the most effective. Most importantly, she'd learned that she came from a family that would move heaven and earth to protect her, that loved her enough to step outside the boundaries of what was comfortable or legal, that valued her safety over their own reputation. Years later, when Mia Romano graduated law school and took the bar exam, she'd think back on that year at Westbridge Academy as the beginning of her real education. All the formal schooling that followed was important, but the lessons learned in that crucible of bullying and institutional failure and her father's protective intervention, those were the lessons that shaped her into who she became. She'd go on to have a successful career, fighting for people who'd been failed by systems that should have protected them. She'd use her legal education and her understanding of how power really worked to win cases that others thought unwinnable. She'd develop a reputation as someone who didn't back down, who wasn't afraid to challenge corruption, who remembered what it felt like to be helpless and made sure her clients never had to feel that way. And whenever someone asked her where she learned to fight so effectively, she'd think of her father walking into Principal Harrison's office with bank records and quiet threats. Think of him sitting her down and explaining that sometimes justice and law weren't the same thing. Think of him protecting her with everything he had. "I had a good teacher," she'd say, and leave it at that. But all of that is still in the future. For now, Mia Romano is 15 years old, walking through the halls of Westbridge Academy with her head held high, secure in the knowledge that she matters, that she's protected, and that no bully will ever make her feel small again. The story of the teacher who protected the bully until the Mafia boss saw his daughter crying became a legend, whispered in schools and shared on internet forums as an example of justice served. The details got exaggerated in the retelling. Marco Romano became a more dangerous figure with each iteration, the Hartwells more cartoonishly villainous, the confrontation more dramatic. But the core truth remained. A powerful man had used his power to protect someone vulnerable, and in doing so had reminded everyone that money and position weren't the only forms of strength that mattered. Before we close, I want to leave you with one final thought. This story is fiction, but the issues it addresses are very real. Bullying happens in schools every day. Institutional bias protects the powerful while vulnerable students suffer. Teachers and administrators sometimes prioritize reputation over student safety. These aren't rare exceptions, they're systemic problems that require all of us to pay attention and speak up. If you've experienced something like what Mia went through, please know that you're not alone and you're not being dramatic. Your pain is real, and you deserve to be protected. If traditional channels fail you, keep looking for allies. Tell trusted adults. Document everything. Don't suffer in silence. And if you're in a position of authority, a teacher, administrator, parent, or board member, remember that how you respond to bullying matters profoundly. The choice to protect an abuser because their family is wealthy or influential doesn't just harm the current victim. It sends a message to every student about whose safety matters and whose doesn't. We can all do better. We must all do better. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If you found it valuable, please share it with others who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more content exploring justice, family, and the complex choices we make to protect the people we love. And as always, if you'd like to support the creation of more stories like this, consider buying us a cup of coffee through the link in the description. Your support makes this work possible. Stay strong, stand up for what's right, and remember that you're never as powerless as systems want you to believe.